Oh, hello everyone. It's nice to see some friendly, familiar faces in the audience. A lot of you know me. Some of you work with me, so thank you for showing in your support. This is my only wordy slide, I promise that, but I wanted to share with you a little bit about my experience. I have been a project manager and I've been leading teams for about 15 years at this stage. I have had the honor of being the leader of some really great teams, and I have actually won excellence awards for this. So I am praying that I know what I talk about. And these days, while there's a lot to do, I think I get better reviews now than I used to, but I still think that they're quite positive, and I hope that you take something away with this, or from this. Now, I've only been in the games industry for approximately 4 years, so some of these concepts may still require a bit of translation. Please remember to use your own judgment and common sense when you go into any situation. What I'll be teaching today are theoretical models, and in my experience, they're sound thinking. However, you and only you are close enough to a given situation to know how you want to apply those on a day-to-day basis. So trust yourself, but hopefully this information will help you. So there are a lot of focuses a presentation like this could take. I kind of went through a few of them before I kind of went, okay, what am I going to settle on? So the case that I've tried to do is, as a producer, how do I create a high-performing team? So what I explicitly moved away from is things like, how do you hire team members that are really great and so on. If you are interested in that, I do have experience there. We can talk outside of the presentation. But what we are going to focus on are, what are the elements of a high-performing team, i.e., how do I evaluate if my team is actually performing well? As a producer, how do I practically build a team, tackle team cohesion and performance issues, and guide the team to success? What are some particular pro tips to provide, especially for things around virtual teams? Actually, I think I cut that one because I ran out of space, but if we have time, we'll discuss virtual teams. And finally, what do I do if and when I encounter performance issues or problems and issues amongst the team and if there's conflict? Another note is that producers look different in various companies. For context, when I am thinking of a producer, I am thinking of a person who has project management responsibility and whose primary role is to support the team and ensure delivery. Hopefully this presentation is something that you were keen to hear. If not, and you're curious about what to do, when I said hiring, I'm also happy to meet with people about topics that do not make its way into this presentation. And I do have some time for questions at the end, but I don't know if I'll get there because I did kind of pack a lot of information into it and I did not time myself. Okay, so what is a team? A team is a group of individuals organized to achieve the same goal or a series of goals. Obviously, individuals are single people, and this presentation will work from the inside out. So the presentation is heaviest on individual and team management rather than the environment. That said, let's begin with this overview. Before you've even started trying to manage a team, please consider your team size for performance. So studies have shown that the sweet spot for a team, the right size, is right around 8 people. You can get up to 11, but once you start getting over 11, the communication required for each team member to keep each other team member aware of everything that's going on starts to become burdensome. And that means that they may spend more time in administration or communication activities than delivery performance activities. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always wrong to have a team that's larger than 12 people. You'll kind of find that if you have up to 20, it may be hard in order to actually build 2 teams in order to break that down. But just be cognizant of the size and that you're going to be moving into a space where the administration or the moving parts and the complexity of that team starts to weigh on the team. In that case, if you have a team that is more than 12 people on it, you may want to look at how you can reorganize into sub-teams. They may be working from the same backlog, likely with another producer. Generally speaking, there should be one producer for approximately every 10 team members. Otherwise, the producers will begin to lose effectiveness as the amount of work that they do to keep the coordination activities starts to exceed the individual capacity of the producer. So, I have personally worked in businesses where there were like 3 producers for 60 plus people, and when things started to go wrong, what they would do is they'd say, oh, we're not getting the output that we want, so we're going to hire additional artists, or we're going to hire additional engineers or something like that. And what they're doing is they're putting even more burden on that coordination function. And the problem that they have isn't the capacity of the team, it's the amount of coordination function that they have available to them in order to make sure that everything is moving effectively. So team size can have a very big impact on how efficient and effective your team is. This does not work by fingers. So I'm just going to use my mouse. Nope, I'm not going to use my mouse. I'm going to resort to my paper notes. We're 3 slides in, and I wrote too much on this slide. Sorry, folks, it'll just be a moment. Okay, so this misdiagnosis of the problem made their producers more stressed and failed to achieve results because those teams were often left on their own without strong leadership. Better, at least from a performance perspective, would be to have more producers who can help those teams manage their capacity and provide stronger leadership so that more of what needed to happen happened and less waste was produced. And I have somehow, let's try again. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Yay, we saved the day. All right, the elements of a high-performing team. As mentioned prior, we start by discussing individual team members and how to get excellence from individuals, because that's the basic building block of a team. Then we'll start looking at the formulation of the team itself and how to foster correct behaviors within that environment. Then we'll discuss how to handle it when things are going wrong, explicitly with team member or member performance. And I broke issue management down into 2 sections, managing team conflict and managing individual performance. And finally, we have a few responsible words about pitfalls. All right, so the smallest element of the team is the individual. However, when I talk about individual excellence, okay, that's the right slide up there. I'm not talking about someone being a hero or a superstar, that one person who does everything. That's not what I mean. I'm rather talking about someone being a role model within the team, displaying individual leadership and working well with others. Individual excellence is a conjunction of 2 things. Personal characteristics, like what's my personality when I'm working with others, and also the work circumstances. And as a producer, you're going to have a lot of effect on work circumstances, but you will also affect people's personal characteristics because we are social animals, and the way that I role model and I behave is the way that becomes the culture for the team, and in turn, the way other people behave will build into that culture. So what that means is that we producers have to have these characteristics ourselves. So I'm going to go over what are the characteristics and excellence, and then I'm going to talk on the other side about work circumstances and specific things that producers can do in order to make work circumstances better for the environment and extremely good for high performance. So personal characteristics of a high performer. They are courageous and proactive communicators. That means that they're not going to hide when something is going wrong. They are proactively going to tell you when something is going wrong. And that actually there are things that you can do to engender that. But again, you have to role model this. High performers are personally and internally motivated. They are generally congenial and exercise good manners towards others. They are supportive and earn trust. They are generous within reason. They are skilled at their profession or highly motivated and capable of learning, so either one is okay. They politely enforce boundaries. You need somebody that is not going to role model either saying yes to everything, but also when they say no, can do it without being rude or disrespectful. They behave with genuine commitment and take responsibility for their work. They recognize when they are in the wrong, and they will make amends. And that is cut off again, so I am going to stop using that. I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to start reading from my notes a little bit more, which may have my head down. But, no, where did we leave off here? Left off on, this is like 3 pages. We left off with recognizing when you're in wrong and making amends. They act in alignment with the shared values of the team. They generally maintain a positive outlook and are mindful of where and how they share negativity. They respect others at all times even when the others are not in the room. This may be hard for some people to hear, but our emotions are not an excuse for failing to regulate our behavior. So it is okay to feel any way that you do feel, but it is not okay to take that out on someone else. No matter how rightly provoked, because let's be honest, as producers, people will provoke you, and you will be provoked for good reason. But again, we have to be the adults in the room. High performers engage in diplomacy, but they do not shy away from handling important issues. And finally, they engage in reciprocity, and they exchange favors with others. So, hey, I'm going to have to work 5 minutes late tonight. Do you mind if I do this? And, oh, I've got your back. That kind of behavior. The good news is that if you don't recognize all of that in yourself, that's okay. You can build it. All of these things are characteristics that are pretty easy in order to develop or to adopt. And if a person cares and understands why they're important, typically they'll be a high performer. Now let's talk about how producers affect work circumstances to provide the right environment for individuals so that way a high performance can happen. There are 4 factors that research shows that a team member must have regardless of their personal characteristics. For each factor, there are some things that we can do. The first one is providing clarity. They need clarity about their environment. They need clarity about the work that and what is expected of them. So, does everyone in your team understand their role? Producers must communicate clearly what the expectations are. Do they know what authority they have and what they are responsible for? Producers should make it clear what decisions they expect an individual to make and be responsible for. Do they understand the standards that their work will be held to when determining quality, or the expectations that the team has about their behavior or practices? Producers should spend some time making sure that every individual understands what is quality and what is not considered quality in their environment. This is supported by things like creating teamwork agreements, which we'll delve into later, and writing assignment briefs, an outline of, hey, on this particular project, I expect you to handle A, B, C, and maybe person B will handle D, E, F if they're sharing. The next thing that a person has to be a high performer is skill. Did the producer get the correct skills required to deliver the project when they put the team together? Or are they doing an analysis and realizing that not all the skills are there? Have they identified any key gaps? This is as simple as asking the team what skills are needed to achieve their goals, and if anyone needs help. This is something you should continually check in as the project continues. If gaps exist, has the producer non-judgmentally identified the gap and discussed how to solve it with the team? I usually create a project issue and I will track that issue to closure. When there's a gap, there are several ways to address it. The producer can arrange training for team members. They can seek to give them access to mentoring relationships. They can structure the team for cross-skilling or training or work shadowing. The producer can also look to add the skill by bringing on another team member, or the producer may reshape the goal to remove the dependence on a particular skill set. So for example, on a particular game that I worked on recently, we had low UI capacity, so we looked at reuse of UI that had been created rather than focusing on creating new UI. Focuses on things like this can shift the burden from one team member that might be suffering to reduce that. Producers can also load balance work by moving it around to other team members to maximize the skills and learning interests of the team. So right there, you can do a lot in order to manage whether or not the team has the skills that are necessary. Finally, the producer should be accommodating in the schedule to give team members time to research, learn, and experiment. If you're in a situation where you do not have this time, ask yourself if that's because of business drivers or because you created a rod for your own back by just creating a schedule and committing to it. Because if it is the latter, you may want to renegotiate that with the people or the powers that be. Okay, so first we had clarity, then we had skill. The next one we have is confidence. If a person knows what to do and is cognizant of their skills and the work is structured correctly in terms of time, generally confidence will take care of itself, but not always. You have a lot of people who have imposter syndrome, and that's okay. Still, if someone seems to lack confidence, the first protocol is to check that clarity and skill are in place, because those are 2 drivers for confidence. Some people experience I already mentioned that, and require some encouragement. Sometimes, however, there is a role mismatch. Are the expectations placed on the shoulders of an individual fair, given their role and skill set? For example, I personally know a lot about data analysis. I have worked in a lot of environments with it. However, I have dyscalculia, which means that anytime I am dealing with numbers, I have a deep-seated insecurity that I am going to mess it up, which means that I do not trust myself in that role. It is a role mismatch. It's not a moral statement or anything like that. Just because someone does not have that skill or there is something in the space there doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. But it may mean that you need to look at how to structure that work and what work you're giving that person to give them confidence. Let's see. And then the fourth and final environmental requirement for high performance is motivation. Now there's two types of motivation. You probably may have heard this before. I don't know who's encountered that or not. There is internal motivation, and that is, I'm just a driven person. I like to get up in the morning, I like to feel accomplished, and that is going to make me show up at work. But not everyone embraces work like a challenge, and even if they didn't, that's not a statement on them. But people who are intrinsically motivated are motivated naturally. But there's another type of motivation, and that's extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is created by us doing things like saying thank you when they do work. You can also celebrate team and individual success, like have team lunches or schedule a product launch party. Those things can affect intrinsic motivation. Imagine if you're generally a motivated individual, but consistently you feel like you're not being recognized, so on and so forth. That will affect intrinsic motivation. So even though you can't give someone intrinsic motivation, we can affect it. Peripherally, and we can directly affect extrinsic motivation, providing people a bonus, providing people rewards and recognition. Meet with your team members regularly in order to provide motivation. There's the one-on-one catch-up once a week, so get a sense of what's going on in their life and help them feel connected. Maintain that relationship and identify and address issues that can be causing them strife. And know when to reward someone for going above and beyond. Achievement awards, making sure that overtime is compensated appropriately, and bonuses, and if applicable, letting somebody know that their manager know that they did a fantastic job. Often you will find that it's the little things that you do every day that build that sense of feeling motivated, feeling a part of the team, feeling that like curve towards excellence. So, again, the four characteristics that we can affect in work circumstances are, does the team member have clarity? Do they have the skills necessary to do the job? Are they experiencing confidence? And do they have motivation? And those are some things that we as producers can affect directly in order to provide that. And I think I hit the wrong button again. No, that just skipped. Oh, no, it just looks different. I printed it before I changed the slide style. Okay, when communicating with team members, you'll often need to wear different hats and communicate differently. Each of these communication styles have their place when you are a producer. So now you need to think about, when am I going to wear that hat? Particularly one of the scary ones is authoritarian. So let's discuss that. All right, first you want to consider what you need to get out of the situation and how your team is going to respond to different approaches, because different personalities require different coaching. Willingness to adapt your management style and approach given a situation lets you handle diverse problems that are posed by your team. So expected excellence. This is one that project managers love because it's kind of like, I don't have to do anything, I just have to expect a lot from you. But when your team is skilled and engaged, you can simply work with the team to assign tasks and set deadlines. Then step back and let the team members complete their work as they see fit. They know what's expected and don't need anything more from you. This is a favorite default mode, and if you live here, it means your team is efficient, follows their work agreements, and generally made up of high performance, passionate about their work. And let me say that I have been blessed to have that experience largely in the games industry. But the downside is that if your team isn't skilled enough to handle expected excellence, or if your pipelines aren't efficient or mature, you may be placing unreasonable expectations on your team, and it might be better when encouraged with an empathetic style. Let's talk about authoritarian. Occasionally, a producer needs to recognize the importance of imposing a vision design on the team. It is best suited to enforcing a decision that has already been collaboratively made. according to team protocols when there are attempts to reopen the decision. So for example, we had this discussion, everybody agreed, and then somebody, comes back from leave and wants to throw a wrench in the works, and you just have to stop that and say, nope, I'm really sorry, but if we change paths, we're going to lose time to rework. We're going to lose efficiency. Sometimes you have to do it because that is the mandate from a central agency or a powerful boss or something that is business. It's just required. If you don't meet that requirement, the project's gone and it's done. So you might have to do that. So when time is short, okay, it may also need to be used when time is short or ambiguity or risk presents a decision from moving forward, or quite simply there's a command that must be followed. For example, if the government puts down regulations. When wearing this hat, it is very important that you hear dissenters out and demonstrate that you have fully listened to their concerns. Then explain transparently why the decision was made and stick to it. A few warnings. This style of communication creates the most dissatisfaction among team members, and it should never, ever be used for personal ego. Team members can sniff that out, and they'll know that you're just creating your own little power dynamic or empire or whatever it is. This style takes both courage and authority. You need backup from your escalation points before going down this path, which means, for example, before I'm going to walk into the team and say, it is my way or the highway, I'm going to make sure that my manager agrees with me. Because this approach is something, it has its points, and sometimes you have to use it. And you, as a producer, need to know about it, but it is not a good default. It has a lot of negative consequences to it. But when this path is necessary, it's often truly necessary. And the producer's job is to grit their teeth and just do it. So if you are a producer and you are in the face of something where you need to put your foot down, please recognize that you need to put your foot down and actually do it rather than dilly-dallying around it, because you will create more problems for yourself because you didn't choose this communication style. And there are a lot of us, particularly those who are naturally empathetic people, who will struggle to do this, but it is our responsibility to, in the right circumstances. A common rejection response for someone to claim that they remain confused or still don't understand the decision, even though you've explained it 3, 4, 5 times. This is a polite way of saying that they continue to disagree. Address this privately. Don't do it on the floor. Don't say, but I've told you 6 times. Take them out, have a coffee, and say, I'm really, really sorry, but this is the way it has to be. So that's everything I've got on the authoritarian communication style. Let's talk about empathetic communication style. It seems to be more common for our industry. This style is about helping team members manage pressure and stress. It doesn't make the stress go away. Oh, I wish it did. But it vastly helps when team morale is put to the test or someone has something going on in their personal life. It's easy to fall into using this style as a crutch. However, especially if you're a person who wants to be liked. The downside to it is while it does create a nice culture, it can also imply that excellence is important. It can allow the team as a whole to begin to casually lower the bar for performance. The best way to combat that is to proactively reinforce expectations when agreed standards are breached on an individual basis, or discuss it transparently as a team if it's a collective issue. For example, a team retrospective. Also, maybe see if you can switch your style to expected excellence or encouraging to go ahead. Encouraging is a communication style to bring out when you want to see someone learning a new skill or attempting a task that they have low confidence in. This can only or often be necessary to get a person through fear and effort pushing through a challenge. But if it's used at the wrong time, it can also lead to implying that poor standards are acceptable. It remains very important, however, especially if you're seeking to grow the skills of your team, which is a core tenet for building an efficient team. So remember, we're thinking about not just like putting a team together and going to do a goal, we're thinking about growing those people throughout. And that's part of efficiency because people know when you're invested in them. However, aim to move away from encouraging to expected excellence as soon as everything that needs to be in place is. Otherwise, the team member may not feel any pressure to take personal responsibility as their capability grows, because you're essentially saying to them, oh, I'll always be there, I'll support you in this. And finally, the last communication style is consensus. This style builds agreement through participation of many. Generally, it does not mean unanimity. It doesn't mean that everybody agrees, but rather repeating the benefits of diversity. Wear this hat when you need fresh ideas and you have time to solve problems. All right, so we have discussed communication styles that you as a producer can take. Now let's talk about the elements of creating a collaborative environment. Creating a collaborative environment requires team building, working agreements, agreed pipelines and processes, and psychological safety. So I have a slide on each of these, and hopefully we will, gosh, time goes fast. It's already 4:20. All right, team building. We tend to call any group of people a team, even if, realistically, they are somewhere more in the spectrum of rabble than Olympic athlete. To achieve the Olympic athlete status, however, is not an accident. It requires teammates to bond with each other to build connections, camaraderie, trust, and respect. There is the old, I'm not sure if everybody, have you heard of forming, storming, norming, and performing? Like you bring a whole bunch of people together, and for the first, I don't know, small period of time, they're just a bunch of people trying to get to sniff out who's the alpha. I don't know if that's how it works. I'm thinking about, I don't know, that's bull. But anyway, like there's this point in time where you don't know anyone and people kind of figure out, oh, what's your skill set? Is that person shy? Am I too outspoken? You know, that sort of thing. And then there's the storming where they kind of start to, fight a little bit over what the dynamic is going to be until somehow they start to move from that struggle into a standard. And then once they're in that standard, they can move from that norming period to the performance period. And what we want to do as producers is get them through that as quickly as possible, but in the right way. So here are some key concepts about team building. First, you need to foster strong relationships during this phase. You need to encourage team members to talk to one another about things besides work. So I am a task-oriented project manager. I'm a driven person, and I really like to tick off my to-do list. And as a result of that, I often go into meetings where people are talking about the weather, and all I want to do is the work. Don't be that producer. Let them talk, let them socialize. There's a balance, but socialization is important. It's part of the forming, storming, norming, performing process. Encourage the team to have as much contact with one another outside of strictly work situations, and that means during work hours. So if somebody goes out into the kitchen and has a coffee with somebody, that's okay. It's not that they're not working on whatever. They're actually doing something that's very important for team building. Recognize it as such because it is important for the social bonds that will help them get through delivery of a project. Create opportunities for different team members to be exposed to one another. So, for example, if person A doesn't really get into the office very often, what can you do in order to get them engaged? Maybe set up a, game or something like that. Examples of how you can put people together. You can create sub-projects. You can do things like pair programming for engineers. You can do working bees. And I actually know somebody in this audience right here who recommended a working bee to me at a particular job that I worked at, and it worked out extremely well. So thank you, person in the audience. Skillshare. Summerfall does gesture drawing classes, and I have done leadership classes. Take a break and go for a walk. Get a coffee. Those things are important team building exercises. Now remember how I said that we want people to socialize. We still want to strike a balance. We want to strike the right balance between people socializing and doing work. It's very important that they socialize, but we don't want to shut down every bit of chatter about the weather, but sometimes it can go a little bit overboard. So, let's see. When people are talking about the weather, let them do that, but remember that you want about 20% socializing and 80% work. So if you're finding that you're more around 80% socializing and 20% work, maybe you have an action item to have some conversations. Let's see. Do something scheduled and non-work related for your entire team. I recommend during business hours when everyone can attend. There is nothing worse than, hey, let's do Friday drinks after hours and somebody has kids or just can never show. Be considerate of those things when you do it, but do things that are fun and engaging. This is team building. It is part of a producer's repertoire of things that we do to make an efficient team. Lunch, a coffee. This is a story. When I was in my mid-20s, I read, I don't know if it was Harvard Business or something like that, but they had this story that was from a respected journal where a CEO went into a company that was performing terribly. He made no process changes. He made no rules changes. All he did was give everybody free lunch on a Friday and say, if you show up and hang out, I'll feed you. And he did this for about a year, and 2 years later, that company was a top performer with no other changes. Now, I was young at one point in time, and I was like, I'm going to try this out, because what do I have to lose? I just booked a coffee every Friday with my team. And I didn't really do it because I had a problem with two members of the team, but at the time, I had a subject matter expert in an application and an engineer that would not talk to each other because the engineer was creating the next application that would replace the application that the person was the subject matter expert in. So there was kind of like this little cold dynamic. Well, we started getting coffee, and I was buying the coffee, so people were showing up. It wasn't like, you had to buy your own coffee. Within 6 months, these two were bosom buddies because the trust levels had gone up from communication. And then the subject matter expert realized that this engineer would make him the subject matter expert of the new application. So I can say this really works from firsthand experience. Let's see. Play games. Okay. Well, why? They're fun. They're a fun, no-pressure way to move people through forming, storming, norming, and performing. And playing games with people builds a sense of familiarity and trust. I have recently experienced Jackbox games, thanks to a member of the audience. Very, very good way of team building. Another thing that you can do is, I don't know, just make a flag that represents your team together. Associations. If your team was a fruit, what fruit would it be and why? Icebreaker games. Occasionally, during retro, 2 truths and a lie. It's not that hard. There are literally hundreds of ways that you can put team building into... I think my pen moved ahead. You didn't see that. There are literally hundreds of ways that you can build workplace collaboration games. Build them into what you do day to day because it makes people know one another. And when they know one another, they trust one another. And that team cohesion is the first step to your collaborative environment. I used to play a lot of chess and dominoes. I wasn't really into it, but I made a lot of friends that way at a previous role. And similarly, when I was working at EA, we would every Friday have a games night. One thing that I did learn from that, though, is that you want your team, remember when we were talking about team size? You want it to be cozy and intimate. That is what you were looking for. You don't want it to be the entire company, nobody will show up, because it's missing that immediacy of that friend circle, and you want your team to start building out like a friend circle. Okay, so regardless, I recommend booking time for team building activities and asking what they'd like to do, because every team's going to be a bit different. Make sure that you push for people to actually do it. You might even want to put it in your team agreement that we have coffee every Friday at 10 a.m. Whatever it is that you need to do, that will get the people who are kind of like, oh, I don't really want to do that. If you get something where somebody doesn't really want to do that, work on that. Because they might not want to do that particular thing. Maybe there's something else that you could be doing. But something that is generally pleasant for everyone and is like low effort, it is a time for socialization. Okay. I am not moving fast enough through these, so I'm going to just try to power through quickly. I generally create team agreements in initial project kickoff. In larger organizations, this may include stakeholders who are not team members, so in this instance, I would put one together in the first team meeting that I set up. What you essentially want to do is discuss the operating rhythm of the team and ask what agreements the team wants to put in place to ensure they work well together. Using an image like this one slide is a good way to generate some ideas of what you want. So you can put something like this up on the wall and say, okay guys, what would make you feel like we as a team are having healthy conflict? How do we do that? Discuss it with them, put it in writing. The elements of an effective team agreement are: what delivery methods is the team using? For example, if I'm running a project agile, we might discuss how long our sprints are going to be and what people need to do to prepare for sprint planning. Rules that the team have agreed on. Bob can't stand the sound of chewing on the floor, and the producer wants everyone to let them know before they fail to deliver something. Everyone agrees on for a team coffee on Fridays. Whatever it is, what are the rules that you're going to use? You should have agreed team building activities, agreed team purposes and goals, and agreed high-level processes. And in particular, how do you make decisions? Do you do it by consensus? Does everyone get a vote? Do you not vote? Just discuss that with them and then document how it is that you make decisions. And then stick to it. You may or may not need roles and responsibilities to be part of your team agreement. It could be something that will help people have clarity over what they're responsible for. Write down the results so there's a record of your agreement. You may need it in the future to onboard other team members, and also to refresh yourself or others, or finally to revise it, because it is a living document that will change over time. Now, if people do not adhere to team agreements, you're still the producer, and it's your responsibility to make sure that people are adhering to team agreements, or if it is not ask, is this team agreement working for us? And bring it open and have the discussion with the team if it is not working. Do not let it change just because people forgot or people decided that it wasn't important anymore. You will find that over time people forget what the team agreement was. Also, when new team members join, it's important to introduce them to the team agreement and ask them if there's anything they'd like to change or add. And if so, bring it up with the team. This is part of the process of onboarding individuals. And finally, the team agreement should be a living document. I think I already mentioned that. Make sure to revisit it now and again. Otherwise, the team can start to feel like it's in a rut or it doesn't matter, and so on. And they'll deviate with it over time without putting any thought into it. It's not because they want to, it's just because it's not foremost in mind. Okay, agreed pipeline and processes. For each discipline in a team, the team should sit down and discuss who is responsible for what, or what tasks in the pipeline. Rather than thinking about a person who purchases the eventual product as your customer, each discipline should see the next person consuming their work within the company as their customer. So for example, if I'm a designer, then engineering is my customer. If I'm an engineer, then testing is my customer. What can I do to make their lives easier? Because it is very hard for them to see that end user, the person who's producing or purchasing the product. But what they can see is their effect on the next person in the pipeline. People should have the autonomy over their work where it does not cross the swim lane. So for example, it doesn't make sense for a producer to tell an engineer how to code, only to explain the standards that need to be met for the engineer's work to proceed to the next step. So you want to give people autonomy within their actual sphere. The only places that producers generally need to be concerned are where things cross over from one swim lane to the next. Does everybody know what I'm talking about when I discuss swim lanes? Like this is, yeah, okay, great, just for a second. That didn't happen. Okay, anyone receiving work in a pipeline that's not up to speed should be empowered to request the discipline before it, make amendments before they start work. So let's say the engineering receives something and they don't understand what they received or it doesn't meet the standards. They should be able to send that back to the designer and say, hey, I'm missing this, I'm missing that, or what is this thing? Can you explain it to me? And they should not start work until they have done that. These are some of the things that you can put into team agreements. All team members should have a high-level understanding of what happens at each step of your pipeline and what quality means at that step. So for example, at Summerfall, when we were doing storyboards, everyone knows that the art should be placeholder art rather than providing feedback when we're in like a showcase saying, let's fix the art. You wouldn't do that because you're not at the right step in the pipeline in order to that feedback to be beneficial. But if everybody knows that, nobody even bothers looking at that because they're looking at the things that they know that at this step in the pipeline is where we should be providing feedback. An understanding of how everyone in the team will be kept informed when key steps of the process are fulfilled. So this is part of what should be in your work agreement. All right, agreed pipeline and processes. Very important for team efficiency. I'm going to press a button now. Psychological safety. All right, psychological safety. It is the belief that one will not be penalized or humiliated for speaking up or making mistakes. I love the 5-minute psychological safety audit, and it goes like this. If you make a mistake in this team, will it be held against you? Are the members of this team able to bring up problems and tough issues? Do people on this team sometimes reject others for being different? Is it safe to take risks on this team? Is it difficult to ask other team members for help? Would anyone on this team deliberately act in a way that undermines other people's efforts? Are unique skills and talents valued and utilized in this team? When you ask those questions, that will give you a very good understanding of what the psychological safety is like in your team. And remember, you need psychological safety for a collaborative and efficient team. So you need to start thinking, if I'm at point A and we want it to be point B, by asking these questions, you can see where the gaps are and you can start to address them as a producer. There are 4 stages to psychological safety. The first one's inclusion safety, and it means I feel connected and I belong. I feel welcome in this space. If you do not have inclusion safety, you are not going to be able to get the next step, which is learner safety. I can learn and grow here. I can ask questions and seek feedback without experiencing penalty or humiliation. If you do not have learning safety, you will not be able to go to contributor safety, which is I can share my ideas and participate. So really think about that. There's 4 stages, and you can't even get to the point in time where people are contributing if they do not have psychological safety over the first 2 stages. Finally, there's challenger safety. So you might be able to feel included, feel like you can learn, and you might feel safe to contribute, but you may not feel safe to challenge. Challenger safety is that I know how the team works, and I can stay when I disagree, even to senior members. And you really need to be there to have the highest performing team. So as I said, these forms of safety are progressive, and you need inclusion and safety before you're ever going to get to challenging. So how do producers support psychological safety? Thank you. I have 10 minutes to go, and we are only halfway through the presentation. I am going to speed this up. We discussed team building to create a cohesive team. We have discussed setting clear expectations and making agreements with the team. Now we need to communicate with empathy and call out and reframe it to others if this fails. This means ask open-ended questions like, how is that task going, rather than asking, will that task be done today? So when you ask, how is something going, you get a colorful answer. If you say, will that task be done together, you get yes or no. Avoid passing judgment. Actively listen to people's fears and concerns. Be mindful of your messaging. Remember to build trust by actually being trustworthy. Make sure your team knows how things are going as soon as you possibly can. Be transparent about how you make decisions and where possible to do so collaboratively. Share both the good and bad. Know the people you're talking to and support their goals. Own your own failures and mistakes and think about framing them as risks that were realized and ideas that didn't work out instead of as failures. And check in with the team members frequently. Psychological safety is delicate. Producers need to role model this behavior and challenge it or reframe it if other team members go against psychological safety. So if you're a person and you're a producer and you see someone in the team act out in a way that is going to humiliate or penalize someone, you need to have a conversation. All right. Okay, that's slide 13, 14. Managing team conflict. I'm going to speed through this. I put a few things under this header. First, there's team member conflict, and then there's individual performance management. With team member conflict, it's important to evaluate and manage these conflicts the same way you would a project issue. They can be hard and scary, but ignoring this issue will only give it time to grow, and fundamentally, it's the producer's responsibility to resolve delivery problems, even if they're caused by interpersonal conflict. In fact, the number one issue I see facing producers in this situation is uncertainty about whether or not they should take action, or if they have the authority to. I personally believe that in a situation, or if a situation meets the criteria of a project issue, then the producer has a responsibility in order to act. So how does a producer know if they should take action, and if that action needs to be immediate, or if they should gather more information, and how long is too long to wait? Ask yourself the following. Are team members behaving professionally? If not, you need to move to individual performance, as well as evaluate the next steps. Ask if the issue is a matter of personal taste or actually a symptom of something that the team process needs to be addressed. If it's just personal dislike, but it's not playing out in unprofessional behavior, you can't make people like one another, but you should monitor the situation. And remember, those team building exercises can reduce those barriers, like in the example that I explained. So I would monitor the situation, and I would look to team building in order to try to build those bonds between members. Morale can affect delivery, though, so if you have someone acting in a way that can constantly be a wet blanket to the team, it's a project issue and must be dealt with. Similarly, if project KPIs are going to be affected, the work isn't getting done or is of poor quality because someone isn't actioning advice and so on, the project is going over budget or an issue needs to be resolved because somebody's work isn't happening, that's a project issue. So in those instances, you must act. Otherwise, again, you can't force things on people. In general, if it is a project issue, the producer should treat it like they would any other project issue and resolve it. So let's say the producer has decided they are indeed looking at a project issue due to team conflict. What should the producer do? First, become curious and gather information about the problem. Meet individual team members, both those that are on the front lines of the conflict and other team members who are not involved. At this stage, explicitly reserve judgment and see for yourself in phase 1, the gather information phase, if it's important not to pass judgment and do not agree with anybody's complaints. Simply ask them to explain and express empathy, such as, oh, I understand what you're thinking now, thank you, instead of emphasizing and say, oh, you're right, that guy Bob, he's horrible. Once you have enough information, formulate the beginnings of a solution and table it as a draft to the team. At this point in time, you may choose to express a stance because you have gathered that information and you probably do have a professional opinion. Use the information you gathered to explain why you landed there. If you have a good team agreement in place, the rules of the team agreement should help refine the idea and get it implemented to resolve the issue. Generally, this is time to take a negotiation stance for the purpose of getting buy-in. Putting your draft solution forward gives you the advantage of being the leader in this situation. So you've created a first move advantage for yourself. The solution will probably be somewhere near the drafted one that you tabled. Implement the agreed solution and monitor the solution to see if it actually solved the problem. If yes, you can close the issue and move on. If no, you need to go back to step one, gather more information, and figure out why this isn't being solved. 4 minutes to go. Managing team conflict. I put a few things under this header. Firstly, there's hold on a second. That's the first bit. Individual performance management. Yes. Okay. One project problem that sometimes arises is that an individual contributor is not very good at contributing. Or they are usually pretty good, but they're having an off week. First, it's important for the producer to recognize the signs that something is wrong. You are not looking for an individual instance, like, I just showed up late today, but usually I'm pretty good. That's not something that you want to jump all over. What you're looking for is patterns of behavior. A single instance may not be something to curb unless it is breaking the psychological safety or somebody being rude or disrespectful in a professional setting. However, if they are showing a pattern, particularly, all right, here's some symptoms of things that should be addressed. Failing to show up at meetings, misrepresenting the status of their work, derailing stand-up and talking about the footy rather than their deliverables. Remember, socialization is still important, though. Putting off telling you about risky problems until it's too late to resolve them, failing to warn you about risks and issues, disrespectful or rude behavior towards other team members, especially if it's a specific class of team member. So if it's like always towards the girls or always towards, I don't know, a particular type of person, you have a problem that you must resolve. Dealing with individual contributors who perform poorly is a project task or issue just like any other, but I have developed a pattern over years that I like to follow. Step one, assume good intent of the individual who is experiencing the problem. And check yourself, because it is very easy to think that it is another person when the root cause is actually something in that 4 things that I said about they don't have confidence, they don't have skill, or they don't have clarity. Did you communicate to give them confidence, skill, clarity? And if not, what can you do before you start to take this somewhere that it doesn't need to be in order to improve the situation? And even when you're checking yourself in step 1, they might really have a problem, but that doesn't mean you can't do better in order to try to address what those underlying issues are. If, however, you have done those things and clarity is, so if you haven't done clarity and you think, oh, maybe they're not clear in their role, go do something to clarify their role. However, if you have checked those 4 things and you don't think there's an underlying issue related to that, you think it's something else, now it's time to meet with them privately, not call them out in a meeting. Take them out, possibly even outside of the work environment, and say, hey, I got X and I expected or need Y. What's going on? Again, you're gathering information, you're not passing judgment. At least until you've heard and gathered that information, they can say, oh, something's going on at home, or, oh, this really terrible thing happened, or this thing broke, or whatever it is. Or it could be, you really need to make something else. Whatever the thing is, at this point in time, you put in the change. You say, okay, well, I got X, but I needed Y. How do we get Y? And put agreements in place. Then you walk away. 75% of the time in my 15 years of project management, that solved it right there. It's just explaining what was expected, maybe putting some things. But now I'm monitoring. Okay, so after you've checked yourself, after you've had a private conversation, and you've put agreements in place, monitor that and see how it goes. Do write it down, because you may need to go to the next step. That other 25% is an escalation, because you cannot sit on problems like this. As a producer, if you let them go on, they are demotivating other team members who are high performers. They are potentially causing social issues, and they are affecting that culture that we're trying to establish. I have 2 minutes, so I'm not going to beat this one down too much. But that is what I personally do, and that's my pattern for individual poor performance. I'll evaluate whether or not it's me. I will talk to the person privately. I'll put steps into place in order to make an effective change. And then I'll monitor whether or not it's actually working. And if it isn't, I will escalate. Okay, measuring team performance. I said that we needed to know whether or not we're doing well. From a business perspective, team performance is going to be, did the team achieve its business objective? Were the objectives the correct objectives? Was the work done within business constraints, such as delivered on time, within budget? Is the team bleeding team members, i.e. we got a lot of turnover? But I would argue that these are the results of high-performing teams, not the actual point. Like, we as a business want to have high-performing teams to get those things to happen. So I take measuring team performance in a few different ways. So there's multiple tools, and I'm just going to jump into them really quickly. One-on-one conversations. Yes, ye old one-on-one. If a producer isn't meeting with individuals frequently to understand their views, how the person is questioning and feeling, what their troubles are, and so on, then they need to, or they're just not going to have the tools that they need in order to manage performance. I think we all know what a one-on-one is. I'm just going to say that's a tool. I'm going to move to the next one. The retrospective. It's a good way to find out what's going on. There's a lot of different ways to do it. One thing I will say about retrospectives, because I'm sure that everybody in this room has been in one before, is there are a lot of different ways. Vary it up, otherwise it gets rote, and then people stop asking or answering the question. But you're better off to do different types of retrospectives, so that way you get the same question answered in different ways over and over. It's important to understand the state of affairs. It's important to take down actions to improve those state of affairs and make sure that you're making headway. So if you take action items in a retrospective, make sure that you put them in your sprint plan and that you see those action items closing. A retrospective does not need to be agile. It could just be a team meeting in those teams that are not agile where you look at what you're doing and how you're doing it. That's the point, is to just see what can improve. The next item is surveying. These are values. This values matrix actually comes from Spotify, but you don't have to use those values. You can just say what's important to us and put those values down. And then you say to the team, red, amber, green, how are we doing in this space? If they say green, you know that you're safe. If they say amber, you're kind of like, oh, okay, that's some activity that we can take. And if it's red, you might want to jump on that immediately. Another thing that you can use is surveys. And don't do it too often, but once every 6 months, you might be able to say, hey, here's a Google form asking, overall, how would you rate the team performance on a numerical scale? I typically use 1 to 5, with 5 being excellent. Why did you answer that way? And what suggestions do you have to make the team even better? I think, yeah. Okay, everybody. We're on time. I want to apologize because I did stuff a lot of this in here, and at the end I started skipping stuff. So if you have any questions, do I have time for questions, or is that over and kaput?
No, sorry, we're going to start getting people downstairs. They are open to chat with you outside.
Yeah. Thank you for your patience. And if you have any questions, please let me know.